In late 19th century Prague, Franz Kafka grew up in a city split by language and identity. His family spoke German, and they were Jewish in a society that often treated both as marks against you. Kafka, as a boy, absorbed that pressure early. He listened, watched, and learned caution. He already leaned inward, measuring himself, worrying about how he appeared. Then the strongest force in his home took shape. That force was his father, Hermann Kafka, a man who valued strength, obedience, and practical success. He pushed hard, judged quickly, and filled the household with his expectations. For the child, it meant a simple lesson repeated in 100 small ways. You were never quite enough. Kafka feared his father's disapproval, and fear became habit. He began to police his own thoughts before anyone else did. It trained him to feel guilty even in silence. So, Kafka built an inner life where he could retreat, and it was not a comfortable place. It was crowded with self-questioning and the constant sense of being watched and evaluated. He learned to see authority as something huge and unreachable, and himself as small, already on trial. That mindset did not fade as he grew. It settled into him. Later, when he wrote, he returned to the same emotional map. Power above, fear below, and no clear way out. As he moved into adulthood, the path around him narrowed. Family expectations and social pressure pointed to one thing: a solid profession, proof that he belonged in the respectable world. So he entered university and studied law. It sounded practical. It promised stability. It also demanded discipline and obedience. And for Kafka, that demand carried a familiar weight. He had to become someone approved by others. Law trained him to think in rules, arguments, and careful wording. On paper, it prepared him for a career that could not embarrass the family, but it did not answer the private need he carried every day. The more he followed the official route, the more divided he felt. His time belonged to study schedules and future plans. His mind kept drifting elsewhere, toward the only place that felt truly his. That place arrived after dark. When the day's demands finally loosened, he wrote, not as a hobby and not for applause, but as relief. Night became his refuge and his promise to himself. He protected those hours even when he was tired, even when the next day waited. The respectable career moved forward in daylight, but the life he valued most began quietly, in secret, on the page. Kafka ended up where many educated young men of his time ended up, inside an office, on a timetable that did not care about his inner life. He took an insurance job that demanded precision and constant attention. Each day brought forms, reports, and responsibility that followed strict rules. It sounded stable, it looked respectable, but it acted like a lock. The hours belonged to the job first, and everything else came second. The work did not just fill his schedule, it drained what he needed most to write. He returned home used up, and that exhaustion became the real price of employment. Writing could not happen in the open, in daylight, like a normal ambition. It had to be taken. He wrote in stolen time, late at night, when the official part of his life finally released him. Even then, his mind still ran on office logic. That daily pattern tightened into a trap he felt in his body. The more he depended on the job, the more the job seemed to define him, and the less space remained for the work that actually mattered to him. He stayed because leaving looked reckless and irresponsible. He suffered because staying felt like surrender. So the days kept repeating, and the nights became a narrow corridor where his literature survived, pressed between fatigue and fear. Kafka did not find rescue in his job or his family life. It came from other people. Among the friends who circled around him, one mattered most. Max Brod, a young writer with energy Kafka never trusted in himself. Kafka started handing over pages he had kept hidden, letting someone else see what he usually judged as shameful. That choice changed the stakes. Writing stopped being only a private habit. Brod treated the manuscripts as literature, not as a problem to fix. He read them, talked about them, and pushed Kafka to keep going when Kafka wanted to shut down. For a man trained to expect criticism, that steady approval hit hard. It did not erase the doubt, but it gave it competition. The dark images on the page no longer looked like evidence of weakness. They started to look like work. With that encouragement, Kafka shared more. Each exchange made the writing feel less like a guilty secret and more like a responsibility. The friendships became a lifeline in a simple way. They kept his words from disappearing back into a drawer. Kafka still wrote from fear and pressure, but now someone else insisted it mattered. And once another person believed in it, the idea of an audience stopped being impossible. Kafka's private world no longer stayed separate from his public life. He entered a serious relationship with Felice Bauer, a woman he met through friends, and the bond quickly turned into long, intense correspondence. Letters gave him control. He could confess, explain, and retreat without facing the messiness of daily life. Soon, the relationship moved toward engagement, and with that came pressure. He wanted closeness, but he also feared what closeness demanded. Marriage meant routine, responsibility, and a permanent witness to his struggles. For Kafka, that felt like a threat to the one thing he guarded most, his writing time and his solitude. He kept measuring himself and finding himself lacking, not healthy enough, not stable enough, not strong enough to be a husband. The more serious the engagement became, the more his guilt grew. He pulled back, then tried again, caught in a loop he could not resolve. This cycle hardened into a pattern: promise, panic, retreat. He treated commitment like a contract he was destined to break, and every step toward marriage felt like a step away from the life he believed he needed. He wanted control over his days, his body, and his attention, and marriage threatened all three. In the end, the engagements collapsed under the weight of his self-doubt. He stayed alone, and he stayed convinced it was his fault. His stories stopped being only a private struggle on paper. They reached editors, then readers, and his name began to circulate beyond his small circle. Publication brought a new kind of pressure. People reacted. Some admired the strange clarity of his fear and confusion. Others simply noticed him. For a writer who already doubted every sentence, attention did not feel like success. It felt like exposure. The more his work appeared in public, the more he measured it against an impossible standard. He revised obsessively, cut pages, and treated each piece as unfinished even after it left his hands. Any praise sounded accidental to him, like it belonged to a different person. Instead of gaining confidence, he collected proof that he had not earned it. He saw his writing as small, and he saw himself as smaller. That doubt spread into everything else. He looked at his job, his stalled plans, his relationships, and he judged them with the same harsh scale he used on his fiction. Publication did not free him from feeling trapped. It sharpened it. If people expected more, he believed he had less to give. In his mind, he failed twice at once, as a writer who fell short, and as a man who could not live properly. Years of split living finally came due. The long days at the insurance office left him drained, and the nights of writing did not restore him. They stripped away what little strength remained. Then the symptoms stopped feeling like ordinary fatigue. He coughed more. He lost weight. Rest did not fix it. A diagnosis arrived that changed everything: tuberculosis. From that point on, weakness stopped being a mood. It became a medical fact. Tuberculosis did not just threaten his life, it reorganized it. Work hours became harder to survive, and yet the job still demanded the same steady output. He measured his days by what his body allowed, not by what he planned. When he forced himself to keep the routine, the illness pushed back. Every spell of exhaustion risked turning into something worse. The clerk, who already felt trapped, now faced a trap with an end date. Writing, the one place where he once felt control, also changed under pressure. He still wrote, but the act carried a new urgency and a new cost. A page required recovery. A burst of focus led to days of collapse. He could not pretend he had endless time to revise, restart, and doubt himself. Tuberculosis turned his private struggle into a race. Each day, job hour stole strength. Each line he finished felt like it might be his last. As the tuberculosis advanced, Kafka's life narrowed to what his body allowed. The future stopped feeling open-ended and started feeling scheduled by sickness. In that pressure, his thoughts turned to control, not over his health, which slipped away, but over what came after. He fixated on his papers. Again and again, he instructed Max Brod to destroy his manuscripts after his death. These were not vague remarks or passing moods. The requests became deliberate, repeated, and explicit. Kafka treated his writing like a liability that could outlive him and misrepresent him. He had already doubted his worth on the page, but illness sharpened the fear into a plan. The same work that finally brought attention now felt dangerous, like something that needed erasing. So Kafka started arranging his own disappearance as an author. The instruction to burn everything turned into a final form of self-editing, harsher than any revision. It also placed a heavy burden on Brod, not as a casual friend, but as the person expected to finish the job. Kafka's sickness did not just threaten his life, it threatened the survival of the writing itself. In 1924, Franz Kafka's tuberculosis finally ended his life. What remained was not just grief, but a practical problem with huge moral weight. His unpublished work sat in the hands of Max Brod. Kafka had left clear instructions. The papers were not meant to be edited, saved, or celebrated. They were meant to be destroyed. It sounded simple. It was anything but. Brod faced the moment Kafka had tried to control from beyond the grave. He could obey a friend's last request, protect Kafka from exposure, and erase the unfinished drafts forever. Or he could refuse, accept the betrayal, and keep the writing alive. Brod chose the second path. He held on to the manuscripts, treated them as works that still mattered, and committed himself to bringing them out. That decision shifted everything. Instead of flames, Kafka's unpublished novels and fragments moved into circulation, handled, organized, prepared for readers Kafka never wanted. The risk was immediate. People would judge unfinished work, and Kafka could no longer defend or revise it. But the larger consequence became clear over time. Brod's refusal ensured that Kafka's voice did not end in 1924. It continued because one person did not comply. In the years after his death, the pages that should have disappeared kept moving. They got printed, translated, taught, argued over. Soon the man became bigger than the life he lived. His stories stopped being private struggles and started being public reference points. Readers in different countries recognized the same feeling in them. Being judged by forces you could not reach, and trapped in systems you could not understand. Over time, his name even changed into a word people used to describe their own lives. If a form never ended, if an office demanded the impossible, if rules shifted without explanation, it felt Kafkaesque. That was the twist. A writer who feared he was failing became shorthand for a whole modern experience. The work no longer belonged only to literature. It got used to describe politics, workplaces, courts, and everyday paperwork. That public symbol stood in harsh contrast to the person who once expected silence. He had lived as a worried clerk who wrote at night and doubted every page, convinced it was not enough, convinced it should be erased. Yet the world treated those pages as a map of its own anxiety. His dread became widely shared language. The attempt to vanish failed. The fear stayed, and it carried his name.